How's it going, guys? It's Poetry Set, and welcome back to an episode of the Dutch Return campaign, Europa Universalis 4. So I realized last episode I started telling a story and then kind of trailed off, and I completely forgot to finish it, which is kind of funny. Pretty typical of me. Apparently we can make it down here now. Not sure why, what changed, but, you know, let's do that. Meanwhile, though, let's talk about the story I was going to tell. So I was talking about my professor in Spain, who is she's pretty cool. She's a pretty awesome professor, pretty chill. You know, she didn't really ask too much of us beyond just come into class, because she kind of like, pretty sure she was just like, you know, I realize you guys are studying abroad here. You probably don't even care if you really learn too much new. You just want practice with Spanish and whatnot, and after that you're fine. And that's kind of how we felt. So I really like that. But the story I was going to tell is that I was talking about like I started talking about how she like knew a whole bunch of languages and stuff, which is pretty common in Europe and whatnot. A lot more common than it is in the US. And I've talked about that in past videos, you know. The difference between the US and Europe there is astounding. But to a certain extent, I don't think it's really something that there needs to be like blame for. It's not necessarily a bad thing. Well, I mean, it obviously is. It would be ideal. The ideal situation would have us knowing more languages in America, but it's not really as crucial, I guess. It's not as much of a sort of like terrible thing to not know another language here, even if it is bad. And obviously there's no downside in knowing another language. So with that being said, also finally are able to do this. Okay, let's go and get you. Take all your money. So with that being said, January. Yeah, I'll wait then. Till then. So with that being said, that's another thing I say too much. With that being said, I'd say that all the time when I don't know what to say. I need to stop that. I need to stop saying as well. Just give me a second to formulate my thoughts. I know I just said I wouldn't say, and I'm saying a lot. I'm just trying to think. So our professor, she spoke like 3 or 4 languages and stuff, and I believe she spoke a bit of German and stuff, as well as French, Spanish, of course. She's a native Spanish speaker. She spoke French, Italian, also Catalan, and that's pretty common in Alicante because of the fact that it is the historical like language of the area, dating back, if you go back a couple hundred years, and a lot, or at least maybe not most, but a lot of the people there were native Valencian, or you know, which is similar to Catalan, Valencian speakers. And so with that being said, again, stop saying that. Because of that, lots of the people there know that. And she also, I believe, again, spoke a little bit of German, and it was kind of funny. One day in class, we were talking about like languages that you have like, I don't even know how to describe this, languages that you have a crush on, almost. I know that doesn't make any sense, but you hear me out. It's like the languages that when you hear this language, you're like, ooh, I like the way that language sounds, like, you know, it. And we, and our professor was like, yeah, whenever I hear German, I am just like, oh, I love German. I love the way it sounds. And we found that so weird in our class. All of us are like Americans. And I was thinking about that. I was like, normally when Americans are thinking about languages that are sort of romanticized or idealized or whatever, we don't really think of German like that, I'm pretty sure. Most of us think German sounds just kind of weird, you know? And I think it's just sort of like a stereotype, maybe? I don't know, because German sounds cool enough. I know... Also, like, my dad has a friend who is German, and whenever he speaks German, like, to his daughter and whatnot, then it's not like, I'm not like, oh, that sounds ugly or anything, but I'm also not like, you know, that sounds super cool. I mean, I'm like, oh, it sounds interesting, you know? German is certainly interesting sounding, but I'm never like, oh, that's like so cool sounding, or like that's you know, sounds exotic, you know. I'm just like, oh, that's German. But apparently for our Spanish professor, she is really into German. And she said that whenever she has, not to rat her out or anything, when she said whenever she has German students, she's like, ooh, not like in a weird way, but just like she likes the way German sounds, and I found that really interesting because I had never had that thought about German in particular. And I think for a lot of Americans, we do have sort of that feeling, but it's towards like Spanish or Italian in a lot of cases. Or, you know, stuff like that. It's more of more of those languages rather than like German and stuff. So, but of course, I think or French. You know, I think a lot of like well, this is gonna sound offensive. It's not really offensive to anyone. Probably not anyone watching this, but like, you know, we think of like white girls, basic white girls, like, ooh, you know, he's French, it's so exotic and stuff. Like, I think that's a stereotype that we have. I think a lot of Americans feel that way, sort of. They have a romanticized notion of languages towards the Romance languages, I think, largely. They're like, oh, Spanish is like, you know, such a romantic sounding language, beyond the fact that it's an actual like Romance language, like Roman language, you know. I think a lot of people, not just girls. I use that as an example, but it's certainly it's not just girls. I think it's just an American thing in general. It's like, oh, you know, there's it's such a cool sounding language. It's so exotic sounding. I think a lot of people feel that way about Spanish, Italian, and French and stuff. And I don't think anyone really feels that way about, like, I don't know, about German or Dutch or Swedish or Norwegian or anything like that. But maybe, I don't know, I'm sure there's at least a few of you who this is relevant to, native, like, Romance language speakers, like native French speakers, Spanish speakers, Italian speakers. Is it the opposite? Are you guys, you know, enticed by Germanic languages or whatnot, or like, you know, Slavic languages? Like, what's the... I'm very curious if there is like a sort of stereotype that exists the other way around, because that's something I never really thought about until like in our class at one time. Ambon. Yeah, we'll do that. Anyways, I'm not sure if that's actually a thing. I'm not trying to posit that is a thing. I'm just mostly wondering out loud, like, is that a thing? And if it is, let me know, because that's kind of funny. But anyways, I do think, though, at the same time, like, everyone has their own personalized sort of opinions on, like, what language sounds exotic to them, or what language sounds sexy, you know? What language is the one that someone's like, oh, I want to learn that one, because that one's so cool sounding. For me, the language that I don't know, because for me that was like that, in a lot of ways that is like Spanish and stuff. For me, the language that I sort of feel that way about, that's not one that I know, or know a little bit of, at least, because like I know a little bit of Italian, I know a little bit of a good bit of like Catalan, and I know a bunch of Spanish, like to the point where I would consider myself fluent in it. But I have some other languages. I have like a long list of languages that I'd love to learn. I want to learn Dutch, actually. Partially inspired, like, honestly, partially because I love it at EU4 so much. It'd be like, it's kind of interesting. Kind of weird how that works out. But also, honestly, though, the language that whenever I hear it, I'm like, oh, that sounds so cool and, like, beautiful. The language that I have those feelings towards the most is actually Russian, which I think is interesting. I don't know. I don't think a lot of other Americans feel that way necessarily, but whenever I hear Russian, I'm like, wow. Russian is like so. It sounds like so smooth when I hear it. And again, that's just my personal opinion. But when I hear it, I'm like, oh, it sounds so cool. and that's like just a personal thing of mine, I guess. And everyone has their own thing like that. So, for instance, my friend that I met in Spain, who I've talked about in this series a few times before now, but she also knows like 5 languages. She knows Spanish and English. And that was actually just something not really related, but something that I found really cool was that we could always just, lots of times we'd be talking in one language, and then we just pretty much fluently, like, or, you know, without much of a break in conversation, switch from one to the other. Basically, we'd be talking, and I would be, like, trying to explain something. Maybe she's not getting what I'm saying in English. I'm trying to explain something in English, like a, you know, a term or a phrase or a saying that she's never heard before. I'd be trying to, like, explain it, and then clearly it wasn't, like, getting through because, you know, when you learn a new saying, it kind of, lots of times, it doesn't translate very well. So then I would switch to Spanish and, like, say the Spanish equivalent. I'd be like, you know, it means this or whatever, or just describe the meaning in Spanish. And she'd be like, oh, I get it. And vice versa. Lots of times when she would teach me something in Spanish, or I'd ask her a question, then she'd have to explain it. First, she'd try to explain it in Spanish, and then, like, switch to English. And that was really interesting and really cool. But well, that being said, she spoke English and Spanish, both, obviously Spanish, but English as well. She's pretty much like, she spoke English about as fluently as I speak Spanish, which is probably even a little more so, to be honest. But with that being said, again, trying to stop saying stuff like that all the time, filler words. She also spoke German pretty well, not as much as she spoke English, but a good bit. I think, like, she spoke German probably about as much as I speak Catalan. And so that was interesting. She also spoke completely fluent, like, Catalan and Valencian, basically, because, like, one of her grandparents is Valencian, a Valencian speaker. But she also spoke a good bit of Russian. So she probably speaks about as much Russian as I speak Italian, which is basically, like, enough to have a very basic conversation, but pretty much nothing else. Maybe a little more than that. But so she actually did speak Russian and stuff, and I really like the way Russian sounds and whatnot. And we actually had a really funny situation where we were hanging out at the beach. Let's see, what do we do here? I believe I think I had already determined what admin idea group I wanted to go for. I just hadn't gotten it yet. I don't know. To be honest, it might not be a bad idea to go for another military idea group. We have so many military points, but at the same time, it's good to keep a balance. Well, I don't know, though. I think I was going to go admin just because it's pretty good in a lot of ways, especially the core creation cost. I don't think we really need humanist. I don't think we really need religious. I don't think economic is necessary. I don't think innovative is necessary. I think we're going to go administrative. But again, do we want to take it? Let's take admin. I think I am actually going to, like, do this right now. I realize that we still have an admin idea group going on right now, but at the same time, I don't know. I think my priorities right now are in being able to actually core land. So, I want to recruit a minister, though. Oh, we can't, actually. In any case, what was I saying? So we were on the beach one time, me and my friend, and we were... Can you make it to there? Yeah, well, with the boat you can. We were hanging on the beach with me and my friend and her friend that she had brought along. We were drinking some wine on the beach. I'm still not sure if that's actually that was actually legal there or not to drink wine on the beach. I never found out. I was like, yeah, whatever. I never got in trouble, so whatever. Anyways, though, lovely attitude to take. So we were drinking on the beach, and there was this dude walking around with a metal detector for like 10 minutes or so before what happened. So there's this dude walking around on the beach with a metal detector, and we were like, my friend, she's very outgoing and kind of just crazy, in a good way though. And so she's like, hey, we should, she was like nudging me, because I was the guy. She's like, hey, go. yell out to that dude, get him to come over here and talk to us. And I was like, I don't really want to do that. And she's like, do it. And eventually she was like, fine, I'm gonna do it. So she called out to this dude and was like, hey, come over here, you know, in Spanish. He came over because we got his attention, but apparently we learned pretty quickly that he actually didn't speak any Spanish, really. Like, very, very, very little. Very little. Like less than Spanish 1 starting level of Spanish. So yeah, very little, right? Which was, first off, just kind of interesting, because he's in, you know, he's not in a huge city in Spain. It's a decent sized city, but he's not in like Madrid or Barcelona where you're likely to run into people that speak English or whatever. Then we asked him if he like spoke English. He was like, nope, I don't really speak any English. He actually understood, I think he understood a bit of English, like, because I would say some stuff in English and he would understand. We were like, okay, well, like, what, like, we asked him, like, you know, what are, after saying, we found out that he's actually Russian. So then we were like, oh, I was like, oh, well then how are we gonna, like, we're not gonna be able to really talk to him then. And then my friend was like, and this is when I learned that she spoke Russian. She was like, oh, I speak Russian. And she started talking to him in Russian. I was like, what? You never told me that? She was like, yeah. And so I found that really interesting. But she started talking to this dude in Russian, and we like kind of, and he would actually use Google Translate, and then like talk to his phone in Russian, and then it would translate it, and he would show it to us in Spanish, which was interesting. Like, again, she only spoke a little bit of Italian and stuff, and it was really interesting. It was an interesting experience, but I really like the way Russian sounds. And I think that's one of the languages that I want to learn, if I get a chance to. Like, I sort of have a list of, like, a bucket list of languages that I would really like to learn. High on the list is, like, Russian and Japanese. And I've tried to learn a little bit of Japanese, and right now, I can read a lot of the hiragana. Like, I can read maybe like, half the symbols, but that's just hiragana. And then there's, you know, katakana, and then there's, like... and then there's like the kanji, you know. But out of the hiragana, the one, well, so for those of you who don't know, Japanese basically has 3 alphabets. They're not alphabets really; they're syllabaries or whatever. Because really, each symbol doesn't represent like a letter; it represents a syllable. It represents, for instance, you know, there's one that represents ra, another one that represents like he, you know, who, she, you know, that sort of thing. And each one is like a symbol. But with that being said, I've tried to learn a little bit of that, and I can read a little bit of hiragana. However, I have no idea what the stuff means and whatnot. And eventually, I want to actually like take maybe my senior year when I'm probably gonna have some class spots open, but still need to take, you know, 15 credit hours for my scholarship. I'm probably going to try to what's it called? Try to take a Japanese class. I'll be taking Italian still, but I'll probably have enough slots to still take Japanese as well. And that's why I'm sort of like not too worried about really pushing super hard right now, because it's just been really hard. And beyond that, I feel like I you know, learning the symbols and stuff is helpful, because it means that it'll be easier if I do keep it, you know, and I've been keeping up with that a little bit at least. And it'll hopefully make it easier if I ever try to really learn Japanese, is sort of my hope right now. But in any case, that's like one of my bucket list ones. Like Japanese, I really want to learn. And then like Russian probably after that. I don't know, like, probably in Dutch is right up there again. I don't really have an interest in learning German, which is kind of funny because German is a lot more useful than Dutch, and they're similar in some ways, but obviously, but I'm kind of more interested in Dutch, because from what I do know of Dutch, and from what I've like looked at Dutch and stuff, I like the way it like sounds a little better, and also I find the history of like the Netherlands and the Low Countries super interesting, and that's a big thing, a big part of it, you know, is like the history of that area is something I'm really into. And beyond that, here's the other thing. Well, it's like, this is not really a reason why, but like, I find that like, like I really like I like the idea of learning. Well, so with Catalan, for instance, I didn't start learning Catalan because I thought it'd be particularly useful. In fact, I you know, sort of went into it knowing, I was like, yeah, this is probably like never really going to be useful unless I'm in Spain. Outside of Spain, it won't really be that useful. But the reason I started is because I like the way it sounds, for one. And also I love like the history of Catalonia. It's probably the area of the world I know the most about, to be honest. I've read like 4 different books just about Catalonia and whatnot. And Valencia as well. So I really like the history of it, and I really like the way it sounds. And those are the 2 big things that, to me, are reasons to start learning a language. I don't really care so much about, you know, usefulness, which is kind of funny because it's like, obviously you want it to be useful and stuff. But that's with like Dutch. Obviously, it'd be more useful to learn like German or something, or French. But I don't really care for those as much for personal reasons. I'm more just like, I want to learn Dutch because of the history of the Netherlands and stuff, and the way it sounds and stuff. So with that being said, it's again, stop saying with that being said, it's just sort of a personal thing. Where's Pegu? They're up there. Okay. Can we make it up there through I with I? We can indeed. But yeah, so with Catalan, but another part of it is like, so those are the reasons I've started learning Catalan and stuff, is because I just love the way it sounds and stuff. I'm not so worried about the usefulness factor. And with that aspect, it's the other thing is, whenever I have met people that are Catalan speakers or Valencian speakers, then when I tell them that I want to learn their language, then it really my experience has been is that instead of like them like judging me or whatever, they're like that's awesome, and I'm like, it's just I I try not to let it get to my head, but lots of times then they are like they're like, that's really that means a lot to me that you would like want to learn my language, even though it's not super widespread or useful. And to me, I'm like, yeah, well, I mean, it's a cool language, I'm not so worried about it being not useful. When I believe when I told I might have told this, I think I probably have told this on stream before, or on camera as well before. But when I told my friend from Spain who speaks Valencian, that I wanted to learn Valencian, she was like, why? So you can talk with, with people from the countryside, people that aren't normally in the city and whatnot. And I was surprised. I was like, I don't know. I like the way it sounds. And she was surprised. And I like that aspect of like someone being surprised that you'd want to learn their language. Because I feel like every language has stuff that's meaningful, that if more people knew about it, it would interest a lot more people. Because like I'm sure that the same thing. So with Catalan, Catalonia has such a rich history and whatnot, that I'm super glad that I started with it and whatnot. And now I've been like reading like some Catalan like poems, and I love them and stuff. It's so cool. But I think that so I think there's a lot of cultural value that you can get from learning languages, even if those languages aren't really going to be useful from like a business or professional aspect, And beyond that, just hearing like people, be like, having it make people happy that you are willing to like care about their language and culture. I like that and stuff, and that's why I sort of want to learn Dutch as well, is because I know that it's not necessarily well, first off, again, I love the history like the Netherlands, but I know that a lot of I think that there's probably a lot of cool stuff that I could learn if I were to learn Dutch that wouldn't I wouldn't really be able to understand otherwise, you know. And I think that it's you know, and then I could share that with other people and stuff that might not ever learn about that, because a lot of Americans are pretty, like, you know, not self-centered. It's just they, you know, don't really have a lot of reason to focus on other cultures. And I think that, I don't know. Basically, I don't necessarily think that usefulness is the only factor you should look at when considering a language to learn. Maybe for your first language, you should. For your first language, it's probably like you should focus on one that's going to be useful, because that's probably going to be the hardest one. But I don't know. Anyways, I'll continue talking about this next episode, because I do need to end this one. This one went over. Thank you guys for watching this video. Please go ahead and leave a like and subscribe for it, and I will see you guys in the next episode. Bye-bye.